Good morning and happy February 20th. So we are gathering on Zoom to try to learn more about digital platforms and what they can be used for. And I think the best place to start is a why. Why should somebody have a digital platform? And Chris Spangle is someone in the liberty movement that has taken the time and energy and last few years of his life to really grow a digital platform. So he's here on Zoom today to talk about why he did it, what it's done for him, and why maybe you should consider building a digital platform. So Chris, do you mind introducing yourself some more and getting right to the heart of why we're having a conversation today?
Sounds like you said I lost a few years of my life doing this, and I would say that's probably about accurate. So my name is Chris Spangle, and I've been a libertarian since 2007, and I started working for the Libertarian Party of Indiana, and I was their executive director full-time from 08 to 12, which is where I met Jess, 2010 in Columbus. And in 2012, I started We Are Libertarians, a podcast about, at the time, it was geared towards college libertarians in the state of Indiana, and brought on a couple of college libertarians to co-host it with me. And since then, it has blossomed. In next month, I think, will be the 9th anniversary, March 8th. And we've had 24 different shows on the network. My show, now called the Chris Spangle Show. It started We Are Libertarians, but it's now the Chris Spangle Show. It's had 4.3 million downloads over its history, a little over 1,000 episodes. And we're one of the longest running, most consistent, if not the libertarian podcasts out there. And we've had a magazine. We have 3 websites currently. One of them is Liberty Explained, which is like a Libertarian 101 website with a ton of resources. And over the course of my career, not just at the Libertarian Party, but I went on to work as the marketing director for the Advocates for Self-Government, and did a lot of work there and in kind of gathering resources for new libertarians. And I've kind of rolled that all into libertyexplained.com. And, you know, we've probably had 100 co-hosts and different podcast hosts. It's really made up the core of my friend group, my social circle. It's how I met my girlfriend. It's really just been a key, wonderful part of my life. And to start a podcast and have it blossom into a long-standing platform that helps launch other libertarian creators like Brian Nichols of the Brian Nichols Show, helping out established creators like Remzo Martinez with his show On the Run, Gingerarchy with Trisha Stewart-Mann. We have, and a bunch of other shows. I've just tried to use the platform to reach new libertarians. I mean, there's a lot of shows that focus on, established libertarian philosophy, but there weren't a lot that kind of had that round table feel that talked about politics in the average person's dialogue. I'm not a professor, and doing lectures on praxeology, which there's a great audience. There's a lot of people that are good at that. That's not typically what I do. My day job is working for a nationally syndicated radio comedy show at this point. So I just tried to bring humor and fun to the conversation, to, give a safe, easy starting space for new libertarians and provide them with new resources and direct them to, what is available in the libertarian movement in terms of ideas and people and just information. Because I think anybody that's watching who's a new libertarian knows it can be kind of confusing, and what's this idea, what's that idea. And I feel we've accomplished that in a lot of ways. We have not just a large audience of, anywhere from 6,000 to 10,000 per episode on the show. We have several different shows that do a great job of kind of connecting in different ways. Trisha is an anarchist. Brian is, and I hate to say like right-leaning libertarian, because I just don't like the whole right-left thing. I'm still a fan of the Nolan chart and the top of the diamond versus the statist argument. My show is probably a little more center left at this point, if you're determining your opinion on Donald Trump being who's right or left. And, Remzo talks about politics sometimes, but a lot of, spice of life. I mean, so we just try to bring in a broad spectrum of libertarians to talk about a big variety of issues and use current events as a guide to kind of, explain libertarianism through the conversations that people are having on a weekly basis.
So Chris, we can go ahead and get started with questions if you're ready.
Sure.
All right, I would like to start with the first one. About how much time of your life do you spend on We Are Libertarians?
Well, that's hard to quantify because, I give myself 2 weeks off at the end of the year to like ignore the news totally and ignore everything. But the other 50 weeks of the year, like I spend probably an hour to two reading the news, another hour reading like a book, in terms of long range thinking. There's three different levels of doing news commentary properly. Like there's the quick hits, there's the stuff that like the quick and easy stuff that you see on social media and newspapers, and then there's kind of that intermediate term thinking, like reading magazines, maybe listening to podcasts around, some policies. And then there's like the deeper long range stuff that you really need to engage in, which is books and reading, philosophy and kind of grounding yourself. I mean, I would say that over the last 15 years of being a libertarian, I've never stopped reading libertarian one-on-one books, like Rothbard's For New Liberty or David Bose's The Libertarian Mind, or I'm about to start Hayek's Constitution of Liberty. There's never a time that I haven't stopped kind of reading about some of that like deeper stuff, in addition to monitoring on social media what people are talking about. So because it's my passion, I can't say that there is, if I have free time, I'm reading. And what I've learned over the course of doing this is that the more you put into your head, the better words that come out of your mouth. I really learned this from a comedian named Tim Wilson. And when he passed away a few years ago, everybody just spoke about how smart he was and how broad his spectrum of comedy was. And I asked a friend of his, like, what is special about him? What made him different? And it was just that, and Ron Sexton said he never stopped reading. He was constantly ingesting, podcasts and audiobooks and reading when he had every opportunity. And and the more that I read, the more that comes out. So that's just a constant practice of mine that is never ending. In terms of technical stuff, I do the main show for 1.5 to 2 hours on Saturday morning. And then there is, for every minute that I podcast, there's probably another minute of production that goes into that, either setting up the interview or editing or copywriting, the title, the description, posting that into the podcast host, putting that into the various tentacles that I have. And so I have the 2-hour show on Saturday, and then I probably do about 4 interviews through the week for a couple different shows. So in terms of on-air broadcasting, I'm probably doing about 4 to 5 hours a week. And then I'm probably spending another 5 to 10 setting up the interview, all the back and forth that takes, getting your scheduling right, doing the copywriting for the title and the description, putting that into the websites, putting that into the podcast host, distributing that, and then just other general maintenance, like a host may need something compressed, or you need to update this plugin, or you need to there's always some little task that comes along. And then there's also the distribution of putting that into social media and there's like libertarians are on like 10 million different social media platforms now, which is good because decentralization and diaspora is a healthy thing. But it does mean that when you post an episode, you can't just post it to Facebook now. You've got to post it to Minds and I don't do Gab, but so there's a lot of time that goes into this. I mean, it is definitely a part-time job. where I work anywhere from 10 to 20 hours a week, depending on what's going on. I mean, during the election season, it's it can creep up into 30 hours because that's when people are really paying attention. Right now, people are not all that into politics, so you can kind of cut that back and focus on other projects. But if you're going to build a platform that is consistent, that is growing in quality, that has good graphics, that has everything buttoned up, that has an active community and on multiple platforms, you're going to put in a lot of part-time work. And it took me about 5 to 7 years for that money to come back to me. I probably invested about 30 grand in the beginning. It's a lot cheaper now, but in the beginning, when there weren't services for podcasters, I put a lot of money into both equipment and online and trying to learn. And now that comes back to me in the form of our Patreon, but I'm still the monthly expense is fairly great for a platform our size.
So we have some libertarians that have joined us today. Does anyone have any questions or things they'd like to bring up while we have about 15 minutes for discussion? I have another question for you, Spangle.
Yes,
From where you started to where you are today, how does that make you feel? What do you think about your very beginnings in 2012 to 2021?
It's remarkable and it makes me very proud because when you're doing something, I talked to this one business owner one time and he said, when you're building a business, you're concentrating on forming a brick. And then you are laying bricks. And then eventually you step back and you see a wall that you've built. And it's not till you see the full wall that you kind of go, holy cow, I remember that brick and that brick and that brick. Looking back 9 years, I mean, the first year we had 72 listeners and it was remarkable. I just couldn't believe that 72 people were listening to us. The show, when you go back and listen, it wasn't too bad, but it was not, there's been many different evolutions of what we've done. We've had 5 or 6 different versions of the show in that time. As you are a commentator, you learn and grow and learn to find your voice. And I'm still kind of working on that. I don't feel like I'm totally clicking yet. I feel like I've got like another couple years of just deep reading before I can really kind of get my voice in where I want it to be, And when I started it was about fun and it was about lighthearted conversation. And I always joke that we were light on facts, but aggressive on gut. We really went on gut instinct in terms of talking about the news. And I think that's very common of a lot of new podcasters or libertarian podcasters. You're kind of hanging out with your friends and it's a fun thing to do. And you're just kind of talking about the news in terms of what you've read from other people. And then along the road, like, you develop audience. And when you start to see the numbers creep, the second or third year, it was like 1,500 people. And you go, wow, that's great. Like, that's cool. And then 2016, it was like 2,500 people. And then it starts to creep up into 5 and 10,000 people, 12,000. I think our biggest podcast episode's 130,000 with a Ron Paul interview that went crazy viral in 2013. But, our upper end is 14 to 15. And then you start to think about the responsibility that comes with that, and that's when you start to take what you're doing a lot more seriously. You approach it with a more professional mindset, and a lot of that is working at the day job that I've had the last 9 years for Radio Hall of Fame radio show with a Hall of Fame radio host. Like, he's just obsessive with what people will get out of spending time with the radio show. And I've become obsessive. Like, if you're going to give me 2 hours of your time, there's so many choices. There's so many options. And I don't want to waste that with junk, right? Like, there's a lot of times where I just don't want to do the show, but I've got to push through and kind of, I'm fortunate to have, people doing research and co-hosts that are really smart and a running group chat where we're constantly testing each other, talking about ideas. When it's a group project, it's such an easier thing than if you're doing it on your own. But the difference between the beginning and now is that sense of responsibility. Am I saying something that's accurate? Am I saying something that is true? Am I saying something that is going to build that listener up, that is going to give them an aha moment about the subject matter we're talking about? Is it cruel? Is it mean? Am I intentionally offending someone? I mean, because you can do that kind of transgressive content that is intentionally offensive, and that will build your audience a lot quicker. But having done that, it's horrible for your soul. It's horrible for your relationships and friendships. So many people are looking at you and watching that and not telling you how ugly that is and how horrible that is for your audience. And, since I kind of walked away from that 2017, 2018 and started really investing in researching my shows and outlining it and trying to be smarter about what I'm saying, the reward from the audience has been tremendous because they know that I have their best interest at heart. You know, I work for them. The whole dream of like starting a podcast or a media company is that you don't have a boss, that you no longer have to work or nobody can tell you what to do. But you really get so much conversation with an audience, and they tell you what they like and don't like and what they appreciate and what they find lacking in what you said, or give you perspectives. And you have to grow really comfortable with kind of that pushback and letting people down. I mean, because if you say something out loud to more than 10 people, you're letting one of those 10 people down. And that's just a part of it. And you have to be okay with that and have to kind of grow a tough skin and just go, I know I'm hurting friends' feelings by saying this thing that is true. But I have to say it because it's right, because when you do commentary of any kind or you do media of any kind, you're putting strain on your personal friendships. You're putting strain on personal relationships that you have. And there's a huge cost to that. And you have to be really okay with that. It's sometimes not easy. And there's a lot of relationships over the course of doing this podcast that I wish I still had, that I didn't do everything the right way. And you just have to learn to apologize and be humble, or to be graceful to other people who made the same mistake.
Does anyone have any questions? Okay, I have another question for you. Let's see. So you shared that it is a pretty significant amount of your personal life that you're using to share ideas. I am starting to realize in the last year or so that we can't rely on social media to exchange ideas, because platforms can deplatform people or change algorithms. And so you really need to figure out a way to take the information you want to disseminate and make sure that you have the ability to not rely on a service to share that information. And I think for me personally, I used to feel like I didn't have enough experience that was worthy of creating a digital platform where my content could be housed and my ideas could be remain without a social media platform. So can you share a little bit more about kind of the way that you went about deciding, like, yes, this is worthy of having a website and a mailing list and all the things that come with putting a platform together, rather than just putting a link out on social media and relying on that?
Yeah, it is a constant struggle for every creator. Like I said, the radio show that I work for deals with comedians. I have a lot of comedian friends. Um, they're constantly battling this. When I talk to other podcasters, they're battling this. And artists of any kind, creators of any kind, YouTubers, they all have what's called imposter syndrome. If you're a salesperson, you have this. And I just think anybody who is in their 30s and 40s deals with imposter syndrome, where in your head, I know in my head, all of the times I've slacked off and all of the ways that I cut corners, or all of the books that I read, but like I skimmed through. I know all the ways that I feel that I am insufficient in terms of being worthy of an audience, or being heard, or I know all the times that I've gotten it wrong. You know, there's not a day that goes by that somebody doesn't push back and I go, yeah, that person's right. I'm wrong in public in front of a lot of people. Why should anybody listen to me? What makes me special? It is a constant battle in my head to be confident. You know, my first job was working for Abdul Hakim Shabazz on WXNT 1430 AM in 2004. And Abdul had just gotten there a couple months before I started working with him. And Abdul's now the dean of Indiana political media. And it's because I watched the man walk into Indianapolis and go, if you're not listening to me, then you are just stupid, because I am the best commentator in this city and I'm going to become the most connected. And he did. And he has, like, everybody tells Abdul everything, you know, because he's judicious about what he shares. And he just had the attitude that you need to listen to me because I'm different and I'm good. And, you know, I'm sure that there is insecurity and doubt in his brain, but he didn't betray that. I probably betray that too much, but that's because I want to be very open about my thought process and thinking. And that doubt can sometimes not be attractive to people. They want confidence. You know, they want no apologies. You know, you're not a real man if you ever apologize or show doubt. And I just think that is not how I want to do things. It's, you know, it's much better if you're Howard Stern 1995, never apologizing, beating up on people, punching down, you know, being taking on the status quo and turning it on its head. Like, there's always going to be quick audience growth in that, but I can tell you, like, long term, that is you know, Howard in 2020 is different than Howard in 1995. So because there's a cost to it. And so how do you deal with doubt? I mean, you know, 2012, I'm doing this podcast, and I said to a friend, I go, I don't know why I should be doing this. Like, why should anybody be listening to me? And they looked at me and they said, you're one of 3 paid full-time executive directors of any of any state party in the Libertarian Party. Like, you deal on a 40 to 70 hour work week with the Libertarian Party and the Libertarian movement in a way that nobody else deals with. If you aren't qualified to talk about this stuff, then there's nobody that's qualified to talk about this stuff. And that was kind of a light bulb for me when this person said it, because they were right. Like, other people looked at me and said, that guy is worthy of being listened to, at least 72 people, right? So it's sort of, I think the way that libertarians ought to think about it is the price system, right? It's what can you get people to pay? That's what it's worth, right? So I constantly have to use that in my head. Like, thousands of people listen to me and read what I write and follow what I do, and that's worth something, right? So that is, you know, even if you don't feel like you're qualified to talk about X, Y, or Z or about anything at all, the media price system in terms of downloads and impressions is telling you that you are worthy because those people want your product, right? So I have to use a little bit of economics to kind of force myself to feel okay about being an expert in public about X, Y, or Z. I mean, I'm really open about what I don't know, because the older you get and the more you learn, the more you know you don't know anything. You know, there's very few things that I feel I'm an expert at. One of them is elections, because I, you know, became darn near an expert, an election law expert for libertarians in 2012, and podcasting, because I've got a proven track record with 5 different audiences of building big audiences. But when I'm talking about the pandemic and I'm talking about electric grids in Texas, like, I'm relying on the knowledge of other people. And so I try to be open with that and say, here's my work, here's our research. You know, we put 16 pages of show notes on some of these explainer episodes because I want you to see where I got my information. You can go and evaluate it, you know, and see, like, here's how we came to these conclusions. Because it's more important for me to teach other people how to think by showing that example than telling people what to think. Because I think that's it's the teach a man to fish mentality as opposed to giving them a fish. I don't want people being reliant on me. I want them to master thinking about politics in their own life. The other tell is just how often when you focus on what you're doing in the way that I do, you start to you have to be cognizant that you can move further ahead from people. And then all of a sudden, like, you're way over here and they're still over here going like, what is a delegate? Why are you talking about the primaries when you haven't explained what a delegate is? So I ground myself in kind of like, let's start at the very basic thing, explain that, and then get to the advanced conversation. So
Spangle,
it's
can you share how you can help people more with their platform building?
yeah. So I'm about to start a podcast about all this stuff at podcastingandplatforms.com. You can sign up for the email newsletter there, and I'll let you know what's going on. And if you go to the Chris Spangle Show, there are several different episodes in the feed where I've talked about some of these aspects at length. Just look for podcasting, search for podcasting in the feed, and you'll find it there.
Awesome. And Jim would like to know about your gear setup, what you recommend for mic, mixer, and tailored sound profile.
Yeah, so I use an Audio Technica. I think it's a 440. Yeah, let's see here. So I like the 4033A, and then I use the Rode Podcaster Pro, and I love it. I think it's a great piece of equipment. Yes, that is a pitchfork and a musket back there. That's $1,200 worth of setup right there. So that's a lot. I always recommend the Audio Technica 2100. It is just like a simple dynamic mic. It's $100. It's a great mic. If you're starting out, that's what I would recommend. I also use a Zoom H6 a lot with SM48s, which are like $80 cheaper than 58s on Amazon. And, with SM48s, mic cords into the H6, you can have an in-person podcast for around less than $500. If you want to have the professional sounding setup, then you can go with a mic like this and the Rode Podcaster Pro. I love the Podcaster Pro. If you've got the budget for it, it's a great piece of equipment. I'd prefer that over the H6. And if you're just starting out and you're doing Zoom interviews, then definitely the Audio Technica 2100 is your best start.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today, Chris.
Happy to be of help. And if you've got any questions, just email me at chris@chrisspangle.com.